Let's talk about creatine. You've probably heard of it, right? It's got to be one of the most researched, most popular, and, well, most misunderstood supplements out there. Seriously, walk into any gym and you'll get a dozen different takes on what it is and what it does.
So, what is the real story? Is this stuff a total game changer for performance, or are there some serious health risks we should be worried about? Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And in this explainer, we're going to cut through all that noise, bust the myths, and get right down to what the science actually says. Let's settle this debate.
Okay, but before we can jump into the big controversies, we've got to start at square one. The fundamentals. What is this stuff, really?
All right, the first thing you need to know is this. Creatine is not some weird synthetic chemical cooked up in a lab. Not at all. It's actually a completely natural compound. Your own body makes it from amino acids in your liver and kidneys. And guess what? It's already in your diet if you eat things like red meat or fish. It's totally normal. So, if our body makes it, where does it all go? Well, a whopping 95% of it gets stored right in your skeletal muscles. And this is the key, right? It's basically stockpiled like an energy reserve, ready for those short, intense bursts of activity. Think sprinting, lifting weights, that kind of thing. Now, that other 5%, that's found in your brain and other spots. And trust me, you'll want to remember that detail for later.
Okay, so you've got the basics down. Now for the really fun part. Let's do a little rapid-fire myth-busting, shall we? We're going to take on the biggest, most stubborn myths about creatine and see what the science actually has to say.
Let's kick things off with the big one, the myth that just refuses to die. Is creatine an anabolic steroid? I mean, you hear this all the time, right? So is there any truth to it? Nope, not even close. The answer is a hard no. I mean, the difference here is night and day. Look, anabolic steroids are synthetic hormones. They're controlled substances for a reason. Creatine, it's a natural compound made from amino acids sold as a dietary supplement. They are two completely fundamentally different things. End of story.
Okay, so myth number one is officially busted. But what about that other big one you always hear? The one that claims creatine will wreck your kidneys. This is probably the number two fear that keeps people away from it.
So this whole concern actually traces back to one single case study from way back in 1998, and honestly, a pretty basic misunderstanding. Here's how it works. When your body uses creatine, it creates a byproduct called creatinine. Your kidneys then filter this out. Simple enough. But when you supplement with creatine, your creatinine levels can go up a bit, which made some people jump to the conclusion that the kidneys must be overworked. But here's the reality check. We now have over 20 years of solid research, and study after study shows that for healthy people, there is zero evidence of kidney damage at the recommended doses. Zero.
All right, we've tackled steroids and kidneys. Now, let's talk about the one that completely dominates internet forums. The big one. Does creatine cause hair loss?
Okay, listen to this. This entire rumor, the whole creatine makes you bald thing, comes from one single small study from 2009 on some rugby players. It showed an increase in a hormone called DHT, which, yes, is linked to male pattern baldness. But, and this is a huge but, those results have never been replicated, ever. In fact, 12 other studies have looked for a link and found no significant increase in testosterone or DHT. The evidence to support this claim, it's just not there.
So we've spent a lot of time clearing up what creatine doesn't do. Now let's switch gears and talk about what the science says it actually does. And you might be surprised, because the benefits go way, way beyond just building muscle for young guys at the gym.
And this, for me, is where the story gets really fascinating. We're talking about healthy aging. For older adults, creatine is turning out to be an incredibly powerful tool. When you pair it with resistance training, it helps fight back against sarcopenia. That's the natural muscle loss that happens as we age. We're talking about more lower body strength, which is huge for staying independent and reducing the risk of falls. And get this, new research is even pointing to a potential role in fighting neurological diseases. It's amazing stuff.
And it's absolutely not just for men. This is so important. Just look at this quote. It basically says that for women, creatine could be especially important. Why? Because as hormones change throughout a woman's life, so does her body's ability to use its own creatine stores. So supplementation might be super helpful during key times. Think pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and postmenopause, for everything from energy levels to mood. Okay, so the evidence is pretty compelling, right? The natural next question is, well, how do you use it smartly? Let's get into the practical side of things, how much to take and what kind to look for.
You've probably heard about this thing called a loading phase. That's the first option here. You take a bigger dose, like 20 grams a day, for about a week to load up your muscles really fast. And yeah, it works. But, and this is important, it is not necessary. The other path is just taking a small maintenance dose, around 3 to 5 grams every day. It'll get you to the exact same place, it just takes a little longer, maybe a month or so. So the takeaway? Loading is just a shortcut, not a requirement.
So which kind should you actually buy? Because you'll see all these fancy, super expensive versions out there with wild claims. But look, the science on this could not be clearer. Plain old creatine monohydrate is king. It has by far the most research backing it up, it's incredibly pure, and it's the most affordable. Seriously, don't waste your money on the hype. Monohydrate is the proven gold standard.
All right, so we've busted the myths, we've looked at the surprising benefits, and we've talked about how to use it. So, what's the final verdict from the people who've actually studied this stuff for decades?
Well, the final verdict isn't based on 1 or 2 studies. It's based on more than 500. That's right, 500 plus peer-reviewed studies. The amount of research we have on creatine is just massive. It makes it one of the most tested, most validated supplements in history.
And this isn't just random research. We're talking about conclusions from major, credible groups like the International Society of Sports Nutrition. Their official stance, which is basically a summary of all the best evidence, consistently confirms that creatine is both safe and effective when you use it the right way. This is a scientific consensus that's been built over decades. So there you have it. Creatine is a safe, effective tool for fueling our muscles. We know that. But remember way back at the beginning when I mentioned that 5% stored in the brain? Well, that's the next frontier. Researchers are now seriously exploring what it can do for our brains, for cognition, for focus. So the question is shifting from just fueling our bodies to maybe fueling our minds. And honestly, that might be the most exciting part of this whole story.